In this video, we are going to discuss some important aspects about the nested case control, which is defined as the um, uh, analytical study design comprised of subjects sampled from an assembled epidemiological cohort study in which the sampling depends on the disease status. And thus the case control is described as being nested in a cohort, as we have basically we have the cohort members, and then we have the baseline data about the exposure from the cohort, and then we follow up. Then we find the cases or we find cases up from those who develop the disease. And thus, in other words, the case control is described as being nested in the cohort. For example, we can see here the original cohort population, all are free from disease, but baseline exposure data are collected, and then the follow-up for some years. This is depending upon the disease or upon the situation or upon when the disease will be occurring after the exposure. And then we'll have some of those cohort members will develop the disease, and this will be the cases, and the remaining who are free of the disease, then we select the controls from them. And this is illustration from the Fundamentals of Pneumology, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, available at the following website address. And nested case control studies are generally used when disease is rare. And at the minimum, disease outcome has been obtained for all cohort subjects, but it is too expensive to collect and or process information on covariates of interest for the entire cohort. And thus cases of a disease that arise within a defined cohort during the following up period are identified, and then a specified number of matched controls who have not developed the disease are selected from the same cohort. Thus, we end up with nested case control design. We can also see in this illustration that we have the cohort members, and those after some time who develop the disease are the cases, and then we select from those who did not develop the disease the control, and then we carry out matching so that the cases and the controls will be similar. And the main advantage of nested case control studies is that certain exposure data will already be collected as baseline data for both cases and the controls, which limit the potential for recall bias. Analysis is carried out in the same way as normal case control by using 2x2 table and by calculating the odds ratio using the standard formula for the odds ratio. Strengths of nested case control studies that they are relatively cheap and easy to conduct. They are less costly, and data related to exposure, as you have mentioned, and confounding have already been collected because we have the baseline data about the exposure. So we are sure about the exposure status of all the cohort members. And then we see those who develop the cases as cases, and then we match them with control. We select controls from those who did not develop the disease, and we carried out some sort of matching. Can utilize baseline data on exposure and confounding before the onset of the disease, which is an advantage in comparison to the classical case control, where by the time we carry the study, both the exposure and the disease have already occurred, which reduces the potential for recall bias and uncertainty regarding the temporal sequence between exposure and the disease, as we see in the classical case control studies. Weaknesses of nested case control studies that the causal inference is still limited. And also there some sort of recall bias which may exist as some data are collected retrospectively and non-deceased persons from whom controls are selected may not be fully representative for the original cohort member due to loss of follow-up or death or due to causes of attrition from the original cohort members. Unable to estimate incidence rate of disease unless study is population based. There are important examples of nested case control, like this one, where they measured the high blood pressure of certain exposure to chemicals, agents, and its association with the risk of developing CA breast, as we can see in this study, which I have attached here, the website. And the overall concept is that we have the baseline data about the exposure for the whole original or the original cohort members, and then we follow them after a period of time, and then we those who develop the disease are regarded as cases, and then we match them with the controls as usual, and we make some sort of comparison using 2 by 2 table. Thank you very much.